2:45. What's up, Crouches? Welcome to another episode. And oh boy, do the drama not stop. It keep on going. It keeps on flowing. Wow. And we got some games to cover. We have an exciting week of matches that happened over the past weekend of Overwatch League. More people getting to beta now, which is great. What have you guys been up to?
Yiska? I have not much to say, to be honest.
What I've been up to, like I've been thoroughly enjoying the Steam Summer sales, and got a bunch of like good games down there. Like I knew both Slay the Spire and Hades were like lauded as like incredible games. I think they even exceeded my expectations. So I'm having some fun there for sure.
Nice.
I played those games through their betas and alphas and early access and all that. You guys are only experiencing them now, like years down the line. Good on you, but holy shit.
Yeah.
Part of me is like, you were damn late to the party, but also welcome finally.
Yeah. You know what feels doubly good? If you get a great game at a bargain price. That's when it's like, woo! I paid $10 for Hades, dude. Like, let's go. And it's incredible. I didn't think it would feel this rich and deep as it does.
It's good. Seems
good. You know what else is a great game at a bargain price?
Overwatch 2?
But not the Overwatch 2 beta. Overwatch 2 in October for free. Woo! A great game at a great price.
Free.
I caved, by the way. I bought the Watchpoint pack.
Did you? I need to check and see if I have beta. Maybe I do, maybe I don't.
Because most people I know that signed up started to get invited now.
Okay.
Yeah, no. Overwatch is now thoroughly my sweaty with other people game. It would be nice if I had a sweaty mode to play, but we already know about that conversation about ranked.
Sweaty mode?
And yeah, I don't know. Like I wanted to try, or I will buy battle passes anyway. I enjoy the progression of it all. I need artificial progression. Someone give me a hamster wheel. I'll get in and enjoy my life more.
Yes. Yep. Same.
And that's why quick play feels boring, because there's no artificial progression.
Yep.
You're just sitting there playing game. Imagine that, like old school gaming where you just jump into a lobby. You played games for the sake of playing games, guys. You weren't trying to level up anything. You weren't working towards a goal. You were just simply playing games because you're playing games. What happened to those days? What happened?
The boomer age.
I never had those days.
It's not enough anymore.
I never once had those days.
That's not true.
So you
I have a hard time. Yeah, I have a hard time believing that.
I don't know. Like I make my own, like even in stuff like Minecraft, I'm like not the guy that just builds something artistically and has no goal. Nah, dude, I'm building the meat factory and try to murder as many animals as possible. Like the first thing I'll do is like just develop a grinder in order to get like all the XP, max out the gear, and then I get bored. I just need the progression, man. What can I say?
All right. Should we progress? I think we should progress.
Sure.
I think we can progress.
I did a while ago now. We're going to move into this. I did a AMA on Juke.gg not that long ago. It was fun.
Okay.
And it's been a fun app to get all your damn esports news.
Yes.
Joe knows what I'm talking about.
Definitely I think we've all participated on it. I think it's a fantastic alternative to applications like Twitter, like Reddit, and they kind of message it as such. And they've just announced a crowdfunding campaign on wefunder.com. You can go and support them on wefunder.com/juked. Again, this is an alternative platform to go and discuss in depth. Again, I think we've talked about it ad nauseum on the show about how frustrating it can be to have like actual conversations with, not like-minded people, but people that at least care enough about the same things to actually facilitate some sort of discussion rather than just lol didn't care who asked ratio L plus wash plus like it's there's less of that on Juked, I would say.
Yeah.
I think there still is some comedy. I think the memes are one thing, but if you are looking for some in-depth takes, some more thoughtful responses, maybe you give Juked a try. Maybe you go support them.
That's the thing. Get in early, guys. Like everyone that has been with Reddit, like from the very start, remembers it being like a magical place where actual like discussion worked, and people had the idea of Reddit still like. The conception of Reddit was like, we are upvoting quality arguments for both sides, and as long as it's not spam, it's being upvoted. Now it's like a public vote on like popularity of an argument, and you might just be downvoted for not even providing spam, but just like providing half a book of a counter argument that nobody wants to engage in because it's not the public opinion. And that like Juked feels like currently much more. I feel like part of it is almost like I have the app and it transports onto my smartwatch. Dude, their headlines are too good, man. Like I don't need to really click on the app. Like I'm just like, this CS:GO player went XYZ. Huh, interesting. So yeah.
That's especially the one thing I will say about the Juked app is that it definitely, if you are interested in multi esports things, if you aren't just into Overwatch, it definitely gives you a great digest of what's going on in the global esports space. And if you're looking to maybe get into things other than Overwatch, maybe Overwatch is your first esport. I found that there is like a large number of people that have been introduced to esports by Overwatch and Overwatch League. Give it a try. It's quite good. I think they've got a good thing going, and go check them out. Go support them. They support us. Asked to come on the show, and it didn't necessarily line up, but we wanted to give them a nod because they are doing some good work, and it's worth supporting. So go check them out.
Yeah, and it's I have to say, like, just to keep it like transparent, I don't think like I get a little bit irritated if everyone's like, we're shilling what like the subreddit has been pretty negative. Like I saw it in your thread about your AMA, AVRL. It's like
I have a thread.
You had a thread on our cow, and they were like, the shilling for Juked here gets pretty weird, and I'm like, you guys are literally on Reddit.com. I
didn't even know I had a thread.
and like posting YouTube links, and every other social media platform is ubiquitous and like basically now a global platform. Why is Juked a problem in terms of like the shilling? It's like those guys were also at the very start in Overwatch. They had a podcast and whatnot. They had like esports endemics, right? Like
shilling is weird. It's like, is it like a negative thing that people shouldn't support? Like, I don't get it.
I think they just assume that everybody's being bought out. Now, mind you, fellow YouTube viewer, maybe YouTube commenter, YouTube frog, whatever you want to be called these days, notice that there is no hashtag ad, sponsor, this, that. No, we are just doing this because we think and believe in the product, right? I have no stake in this. I am on the app. Sure. Yes. AVRL is on the app. I think yes.
He has a stake in it. He's on the app.
I have a Twitter account. Oh, shucks. This is because we think that
Elon's payroll.
It has nothing to do with any kind of monetary gain. Literally have nothing from them. I don't particularly want anything from them.
Yeah.
I think it is a good platform. More platforms to discuss esports is better. And I think they do it better than some of these other sites. So.
I also don't have a share or anything like this, just for full disclosure.
Transparency's sake, yeah.
There's
no ads. There's no sponsorships. This is by law. We would have to put that here if we got any kind of monetary gain. Just, again, by U.S. law. Notice, none of this is anywhere here. We just genuinely think it's a good product.
Except AVRL, who owns like...
I am not American.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not American, so we don't have to put ad in there.
Sure, that's fine.
No, I haven't been paid. Oh, bro, if I would have, I'd be on my 10th AMA by now if I was getting paid.
Right, yeah.
I found the questions, I did one as well. I found the question generally to be relatively thoughtful, I will say. It was nice. Yeah. It wasn't just like, would you rather fight a horse-sized duck or 100? Like, come on.
Yeah.
I definitely fight 100 babies. But that's besides the point. Okay. Alrighty. Don't know why I brought that up. We'll find out. Let's move into what we're actually here for, which is the patron read. Episode 245, brought to you by AVRL Vista Bebe, Battlecry, Refine Bean, Bronzebot Booha. Philadelphia's more of a stage 3 team anyway. True. Chris R34444, Cash67, Lolshin, Porkchop Sammy, Rick Zane, Volamel Smooth Nuts, and our YouTube members, Ice Ham Jello, William Jesse, Vishmam, Fire Lemon 6, AK, and Chris R. And man, whoever that Philly fan is, they've already given up on Midseason Madness. They've already moved on to Summer Showdown. It's like, Philly aren't even out. They're probably going to make it in, you know. Let's give it a little bit more rope before we give it up. But, you know, sure, they're kind of struggling, but, you know, they're okay.
Would it surprise you that this fan has been in constant contact with me about their name, and they have a full-blown strategy for the remainder of the season?
Really?
Right, it's not going to take too long. It's not going to take too long before it becomes Philadelphia is more of a 2023 team anyway.
It's actually pretty impressive that you've jumped that far down the list, but there's a tally going of what their name is next. So
Philadelphia is more of an Overwatch 3 team anyway. That's like 5 years down the list. You know, we're getting there. We're getting there.
I am impressed. I will say, again, if you want to change your name, if you're not happy with it, if you want to get in like a little meme again, Smooth Nuts, and we have a Philly little joke, I think everybody would appreciate it. And if you want to, just get in the DMs. I'll give it a change. No big deal.
Well, you know what would be pretty impressive if all the Patreons somehow like coordinated and made it a full copy pasta of some sort. You know,
like, it is impressive on how many people are like.
Person did that? What's the character limit for a name? Because one person could just do a full meme, couldn't they?
Oh, true. Yeah, there's probably it's within reason.
We're gonna have to now because of that. I'm gonna have to have a rule in there for the maximum character length. Otherwise, somebody will. So I've just spoken that into existence.
Runaways.
Let's talk about the hot topic of the week. Let's talk about the hot topic of the week, because you know what? I feel like there's been a bit of an injustice, and damn right, I think justice needs to be served here. Man, people are latching onto. People are really latching onto. Is it getting boring? Like, I don't understand. Like, there's some shit going down. Some Twitter stuff going down, and then the community is just latched onto it really heavily. And I guess we'll talk about how we you know what this is. Let me just run through what actually happened first, and we'll talk about it a little bit.
Sure.
So this stems from, first and foremost, the DPay tweet. Now, for those that need a bit of a heads up on what the DPay tweet is, DPay sent out a tweet a few days ago now saying, I'll just read it up verbatim. I really don't know how people look at Spitfire and don't think, maybe Ryan comp is really good. In Overwatch 1, it's great. In Overwatch 2, BAP got a stupid buff, and there's just an insane hit scan pick that fits the comp super well. Thank God they're nerfing Ryan a little, but BAP next, please. And that started a little bit of a thing where Spillo came on in, and he's like, you know, this is a little bit disrespectful because we worked really hard on this comp, and you know, if it was really this good, why isn't everyone playing this? Blah blah blah. All very fair points, and all that kind of stuff. And DPay actually went on Reddit to explain further. He wrote like a novel on this, so I'm not going to try and run in there and paraphrase anything. You go to his comment history and find it if you really care. And yeah, DPay is not even coming from like any sort of negative place because he explained himself pretty well. This is the kind of nature of Twitter as well. You got 240 characters. You're not going to get all your points across properly, which is why Twitter is the best platform in the world to have all your points misconstrued and for people to fight over bullshit where no one knows what the other person's saying, and people argue because well, you just can't really fit a cohesive argument in 240 characters. But even if you could, no one would read it anyway. So you know, whatever. So this then shifts a little bit further into Washington Justice lost against London last week in their matchup in a 2-3 loss. And map 5 in particular, I think, was quite a contentious loss in terms of people's opinions about how that should have gone and their opinions on the teams and all that kind of stuff. So quote tweeted DPay, and he says, I don't see the issue. Just have your players grind Ryan and ranked in the... Oh, right. I mean, dig into Stats Lab and find comps that are doing well, counter... give give dev feedback that is definitely being listed. Wait, no, you could sign a plan, wait for a visa to and it's basically that's what it was written as. So we see Pretty is obviously listing up some issues with the Overwatch League that he's dealing with right now. But where things really got blown up, where things got really wild, is when Christopher decided to Christopher, the head coach in London, then quote tweeted this. He quote tweeted Pre with the Wojak crying angry face, saying, "My face when $10 billion super team loses to Spitfire, abusing the most broken, uncounterable, unfundably unbeatable comp in the game." Pre has another response to that that's less relevant to what we're about to talk about, and then Pre also then had his own tweet a little bit later on, just going over some of the issues more in depth about what he's finding in the Overwatch League. So that's the general rundown of what's been happening, and obviously with all of that, Reddit and the general community has just been jumping in there and getting amongst the drama. So who wants to start? Who wants to be the first person to try and undogpile and just like, go through the rubble of this?
I think it's in very ironic circumstances, as someone who has very, very publicly criticized the Justice for a long time, right? From last season, from the start of this season, I have been on the Justice hate train for a minute, and I'm here to tell you it's getting a little boring, guys. Like, yes, there are criticisms. I cannot. This is tough to get into, but it's messy rather. It's not tough. It's messy. Are there actual points that Pre has to make? 100%. And I think we've talked enough about this. I think Yiska's talked to him enough that you can understand that he does good work. There are some fair criticisms that he derives, and you can levy some fair criticisms against his points. But what you can't do is take a team that generally has been pretty disappointing and try to use them as a torchbearer, right? You can't just dogpile on them. And I think that's what rubbed me the entire wrong way. I support, I'll make my stance very clear. I support the desk of the Overwatch League being a little bit more opinionated. I support them having opinions. I support them, criticizing teams, be it fairly or unfairly. I think that's a better starting point than where we were at previously. So I stand by my tweet, supporting and praising them for taking it to the New York Excelsior, taking it to the Justice and being frustrated with them, maybe voicing some of the community sentiment. But what you can't do, not to the league desk, to be fair, but in terms of the community as a whole, is hit this with another Florida Mayhem situation. I reference season 1, season 2, Shanghai being pretty piss poor. But plenty of other piss poor teams get smoothed under the rug. So yes, I think Justice kind of jumped out in front here and made themselves known as being very public, looking at Pre's tweets and getting into the mix a little bit, which again I support. I think one thing you have to credit him with is how vulnerable and how transparent he's been since his tenure within the league. I think that's something we should support. And it's tough to be in his shoes, I would imagine, when the community reacts the way that they do. When you can't really have mature discussions, and people do use it as like, oh, excuses. I think Avril, you mentioned this prior to the recording of the show. I'm kind of over the Justice. I am as frustrated as everybody else, but am I more frustrated about the Toronto Defiant being marginally better and arguably worse in some metas? Yeah, I think I should be. I think everybody should be. I think they're I think they're far more woeful in my mind than the Justice right now. I think in terms of form, yeah, the Justice are inconsistent, but the Toronto Defiant have been equally, if not more, confusing all season. Then you have a team like the New York Excelsior, who don't even have a 6th player, like for half the season. I think that's just egregious. I think you have a team like the Valiant doing all kinds of weird stuff that, again, I think we've spoken plenty about. I think Paris is trying to improve, and you have to give them credit there. But again, it's frustrating to try and deal with them. Titans, again, they're making moves, but I don't understand why. Maybe that's not fair to say. I do understand why the Justice are getting a lot of flack for this, is because they're a little bit more public. But I don't think it's fair when you have a team like Defiant, you have a team like Boston, who, again, some of these teams are trying, and it's unfortunate that the Justice can't, but that's also a decision that they made.
It's because those teams made a blood sacrifice, to appease the overlords. They're on Skull Island, and to appease Kong, which is the collection of ARCAL, they're like, well, Huck, gonna have to burn you at the stake. KDG, gonna have to send you off the plank into the sharks. So you have to make a blood sacrifice as to appease people.
And I think you can levy that against them and say, like, look, like, maybe Supreme, maybe there is some questions there. Maybe you have to make some changes. But I ask in return, I answer with a question: who are you going to get feasibly right now that is going to be a noticeable upgrade for this team? I do not believe, at my heart of hearts, gun to head, the fate of the universe on the line, I don't believe that this is a coaching issue. Honestly, I do not believe that, and I did not believe that last year.
It depends on how you define coaching issue.
Joe's gonna get some DMs about that. I witnessed chat. I just witnessed, all fan discussion, like, oh yeah, Volamel doesn't think it's a coaching issue. I just saw the collective meltdown of the universe with that comment. So, Yiska, you go next. You go next. I'll think about this one a bit more, but Yiska, you go next.
Okay, so let me get a couple of things out of the way. I think, and I had a tweet thread. I think this should have not been about London at all, at any point. I think you can make a point about Reinhardt balance.
Sure.
And about Baptiste balance without mentioning them, because that's another premise I have to get out of the way. It matters, and how you lock into them are kingmakers. The variance that every team is under each season is elusively large. I can tell you, if Chengdu doesn't hit their ball meta last year, they go to 0 tournaments. And everyone's like, yo, we are wasting Leafs Prime on this team, right?
Sure.
If currently, what happens if you actually have an inevitable Reinhardt meta or an inevitable Winston meta, worse yet, and you are the Atlanta Reign or the Houston Outlaws? Do you expect them to drop in the rankings relatively? We are talking about...
Yeah, sizable.
We're looking at the results of a team and say they did a bad job, when we should look at the breadth of randomness, or like hedges for randomness they've created for themselves, and see if they got unlucky or if they were just ill-prepared. Okay? So, number one, out of the way, like, this should have never been about London. I don't like that it's about London. Unfortunately, this tainted the conversation, and I think that was a mistake.
Sure.
This next one is then we look at the meta distribution, and I think there's a good argument to be made that while the Justice on paper were actually pretty well prepared for this season, they got pretty unlucky with what's happening, right? I think it's also not as bad as people make it seem. And why do I think that? Because I have different expectations for this team. I think it's a delusional take to say this is on paper a top 5 roster in NA. I think that's just not true. Like, I would even say their gambles and their scouting have hit beyond what we would have expected them. Their backline is outperforming expectations. And that's down to scouting, right? Like, that's something that we should acknowledge, right? Yep. But guys, you got to realize Yes, if you look at the name recognition of that team, that is big. Now look at every other team that is up there. Look at shock how stacked that team is. Like, they don't have someone like Proper. Barely anyone has someone like Proper. Decay is not like someone like Proper. Decay sometimes has games like that. He's very consistently good. He's not Proper level.
Sure.
No.
Then you look at a team like Gladiators. They have like a lot of depth, but high quality depth. Like none of the hires, other than maybe Reiner, were even, you know, like in the rookie class where you would think like maybe you're taking a bit of a gamble. The gambles were Ants and Padpan. Those worked out. But we're dealing with a different level of team on paper, right? You go down, Dallas, the same is true. I think the same is true for Atlanta. Like these teams are all basically teams that can afford their top picks and where like other team or players don't say no to if they come knocking.
Sure.
Right. So that's not a team that the Washington Justice is. It just isn't. Right? Your off tank is Kalios. It's not Void. Right? Like whatever perception you have of your team is of a glorified idea of who Decay and Mag are. They aren't S tier talent, my friends. So I think or let's say Decay might be S tier. They're not S plus.
Sure. Okay. Yeah. It depends on how you define it. Sure.
So
I think there's some weird expectations for sure. I'll let you finish before I start.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So what's their reasonable range? I think like when we did our power rankings, and that's by the way what everyone should be evaluating their roster on. In season 4, everyone thought they were doing a great job preparing for this season, and it didn't end up working out. So like we have to then acknowledge that like what was the problem with their roster building approach? Probably not too much because we didn't see it either, right? Like otherwise we would have called out the issue, surely. Like is everyone so smart? Like we should have. Once again, they made it pretty high up, right? This year we said 8th or 7th place on average, right? That's not too far off. That is not more off than many of the teams we refuse to talk about. Now I understand that the Justice are a team that have yet to make, you say blood sacrifices, others might say attempts to change the situation. Now here's where Priest's tweet comes in. You want to change things, but you like if for people who have watched his live stream, he acknowledges that changes would have to be made, and he acknowledges that things that there is an underperformance, and I agree that in their respective range, I think what they would ideally always be hitting is at least equal wins and losses, right? That's currently not happening, and they're not qualified. And that's an underperformance to the degree that it probably warrants some reactions. But it is not a ridiculous one, right? And what do you do in order to get better? Well, a lot of things don't work out now. And to a degree, that's no one's problem because we're just in that, or no one's fault. We're just in that situation. For some stuff, it's definitely disempowering and just straight up frustrating for teams to navigate this. Dude, I feel like a broken record talking to players every interview. Like, I mean, dude, like, how do you even manage to prepare for Sojourn? Like, there's no ranked. Like, you didn't even have access to beta.
Yeah.
There's no pugs. What do you do? Like, someone like Gurio will tell you, well, I'm sitting in my workshop mode practicing Sojourn aim 3 hours a day because there's nothing else, right? Every player, the pressure is on. Like, they don't feel the agency in their destiny. They see their career pissing away. Especially, it's rough for people that aren't naturally gifted and that got here by grind, and now they can't.
Okay.
Their ability to grind has such high diminishing returns because of we lack the tools to improve them. And teams that get away on grind, and if you listen to Priest's stream, you will also find that they are one of the teams that have the highest amount of practice hours. I think they're running 6 days a week, 3 blocks. That's high up there, right? They're trying, right? Now, okay, let me address the elephant in the room, because I think it's a fair point to say, after so many seasons of certain expectations for this team, which, by the way, I don't think have been ridiculously undermet. I think whenever they hit their meta, they can actually go pretty far in terms of the playoffs. I think that's the Justice were one of the teams always that were the closest to showing how silly our tournament system is, based on a huge meta change, hitting in stage 4, you eking in, and maybe winning the league based on the last play-in slot, and that being way too forgiving, right? That's that team. That was that team that, like, if they got in season 2, bro, if they like that, then they
should have.
In season 3, like they had the decay situation, right? So with all of this said, right, like, you gotta evaluate the situation under those circumstances. You also have to, and I think this is a huge misconception that I think is very slow to come out, and it's even prevalent in Overwatch League cycles, is that people assume they are paying top tier salaries now, or paying top tier buyouts. That is not the case. The question is how you value, everything else that's going around, and like what kind of offers they make their players. Did they fly business class? What about like accommodations or food and whatnot? Like, how do you measure that up? But like, in terms of like their roster, salaries, and buyouts, they aren't like a Fuel or a Dragons or a Toronto. Even a Toronto Defiant is so astronomically far away from them. Yeah. Right? Them getting these players is something that you should count towards that organization's ability to attract talent. If you disagree with me and think Mac and Decay and Happy are all like S-tier performers that should be performing better, they are attracting that type of talent on salaries that usually don't get that type of talent, right? Also because, like, for instance, some players just like to be babied a lot and don't like to have the responsibilities of life. And then someone like that Washington Justice comes in and organizes that for them. Now, not to run defense too much for their Justice, because there's a legitimate point here where maybe, and if I look in my heart of hearts, I do believe that a better head coach or a different head coach could probably drastically improve their performance and move up their ability, their range, a decent amount. I think they got pretty unlucky with the meta, but I think a better head coach would get some stuff in more order and would be able to align that team more in order for them to perform at a higher level. But please tell me who. As you pointed out, like, who the fuck can you get?
I will say, I don't want to jump in front of Avril, but I will say I need a third pass on this to bring up some counterpoints to what he said. That's all.
Okay.
I can't wait for the people. I can't wait for the people to respond. KDG. They're like, "Oh yeah, KDG's available."
He doesn't fix it.
Toronto didn't want this guy. So
take that with what you will.
We got to take some hand-me-downs over here. And some people will say, well, just let Moby Dick be. Not Moby Dick, Ty Dollar be. Well, Moby Dick also now kind of, but on his team. But yeah, do the Moby Dick thing where Moby Dick basically just takes over his interim. Yeah. Ty Dollar maybe just overtakes his interim, or Chihuahua or somebody like that. Because here's the the offense and the defense for the Washington Justice coaching line is that outside of Supreme, Chua and Ty Dollar are very well respected coaches who have a proven record. So say what you want about Supreme, but those two guys are fucking legit.
Yep.
I got to be careful with this conversation because I don't want to try and project too much about what I think coaches are or are not doing.
Sure.
Which is the craziest thing I'm seeing publicly, because now all the armchair analysts are suddenly, for some reason, they're experts on coaching again. Like they're the way some people are talking online are like you'd think these guys are all like fucking multi-year winning, better than crusty level coaches. They're all coming out like, oh yeah, these coaching decisions and this coach. I'm like, what the fuck do any of you know about coaching? None of you know jack shit about coaching. It's just so weird. It's like it's. I'm not necessarily saying it's not a coaching problem. It sounds like I'm playing too much defense here. It might very well be a coaching problem, but the amount of witch hunting happening for Supreme right now, even if he is the issue, it's just so weird. Like the level of confidence people have on something that fundamentally they know nothing about. It's like these motherfuckers have never seen a scrim in their life, you know, never sat in a scrim, know nothing about coaching, but are sitting in their armchairs typing away about all this coaching related business like they know what they're talking about. It's like, what the fuck? How are you guys all suddenly experts on coaching and budgets as well? How like the first question, one of the first questions that came through in the pre-stream was some dude who was just like, yeah, so like how do you feel about the fact that your team is underperforming with one of the highest budgets in the league? And Pre's just like, I find that interesting. How do you know what my budget is? That's like pretty private. Do you have some info about what my budget is? It's like I mean that's kind of correct on Pre's, but like how is everyone now suddenly commenting on Washington's budget? Like, is this like a publicly known thing? Does everyone know Washington's budget now? Can I see some sources, or did everyone just make this shit up? Like, where did this start from? Like, where did it come from that everyone thinks Washington has a huge budget?
Yeah.
Assuming from where? But it's just like
name recognition.
They're literally making asses out of you and me with these assumptions.
Yeah.
Which is like, what? Who said Washington had a high budget?
Nobody.
Who said this? Show me the source. No one said this. Yeah. Where does this even come from? Like, I don't even understand where. Like, I don't know, the level of confidence that people have on these topics they know nothing about is crazy. Crazy.
Yeah.
Oh, this team is underperforming due to the budget. I'm like, what is their budget? Give me the number. You don't fucking know the number, do you? Yeah. No one does, except the people in that organization. So why are people bringing that up? So weird.
It's like last year they got, every year, Overwatch League teams get scorecards on their spending of salary and buyouts, right? And that doesn't have a particular number that everyone spends, but it ranks you where you are. And based on that, like, Justin have come out and said, like, we're not the top spending org here, right? Like, they are midfield, and they should then therefore be held to midfield performances. Yes. And maybe they outperformed the midfield in terms of the agents they are able to acquire, and you're setting your expectations based on that, which is fair. But if you think that, then you also gotta give credit to Pre for attracting those types of players on that budget and reason from there.
And then there's the whole expectation conversation. What were all of our rankings for Justice preseason? I think you looked it up. Mine was like 8th place, and yours was 7th.
Yeah, we're all around the same. Yeah,
right. So all these people are like, oh, this team is performing so below expectation. What is your expectation? Because I'm going to say this right now. Anybody who ranked Justice higher than 7th, you're a clown. Like, yes on you. Like, if you believe they're going to be better than 7th, and now you think they're underperforming based on that expectation, you've raised the expectation for them really high. Like, you've overvalued Decay, you've overvalued Mag. This is coming from me, by the way. I know some of these players really well. You've severely overrated this team and their players. We're like, oh man, they should be doing so much better with what they have. I'm like, how much better? Give me a number. Like, where do you think they should be? Because when I look at the rankings, they're currently 9th. I predicted them 8th. They're 1 below my expectations. So technically speaking, yeah, they are below my expectation by 1, but they're within the range that that is acceptable for me. If I look at the top 8 of NA, there are 2 teams that have performed above expectations. One is London, obviously performing heavily above expectations, and Florida, who probably performed above most people's expectations that didn't understand the Florida Mayhem. So we have, inside of that, if you removed London and Florida, then Washington would just be 7th. They'd be about where you expect them to be. So when you have 2 teams that overperform expectations and then Justice playing to about where they should be, they're 2 below because 2 teams overperform. Correct? I mean,
pretty much.
Doing just a little bit of math here.
Yeah.
And So I don't think they're that low. You know, people are acting like Washington's like 12th or 13th place or something. Is 9th like 9th is probably below 9 is 2 below 7. I'll give you that. But is it that crazy to think that this is where Justice is just supposed to be? Because even from the Justice's own words, their goal for the season is to go even record and make the playoffs. That's it. They don't have any like outsized goals of winning the whole fucking thing.
Yeah.
They know they're a mid team and they're expecting to do above mid, above average results. That's legitimately their goal. So,
and once again, there's variance, right? Like, let's say we get a meta with the Winston, Tracer, Widow. Dude, happy on Widow, Decay on Tracer, Mac on like Winston. Like, based on that already, you're like now putting people through a world of hurt. Where do you like? Then they can hit the upper threshold of their performance, and then you could see them in 5th place. That's just how this league works. But I
just think like, I just think people are getting mad that a mid team is mid. It's like, yeah, well, you're angry that a mid team is mid. Okay, you do you, man. Like, yeah, I can't believe the LA Valley are only 6th place in APAC. It's like,
yeah, that's
all right. Bizarre. That's the same fucking energy I'm feeling over here, guys. I don't know, man. It's like,
and here's the difference, right? Like, everyone had the beginning of their own shitstorm, including DanYXL, where people like, oh, this is a joke, blah, blah, blah. You know what they did? They just said nothing. They just like shut their mouth and let issues be issues that they're facing that are beyond what they can control. Because I can tell you, there are, factors that some of these teams, especially the team staff, can't control. It is outside their ability to control. And they are just like, whatever strategy you make, I have absolute empathy for people where things are bubbling under the surface and issues like just not being fixed, that is frustrating. Is it wise to air this based on what, like the shepherding aspect of it? Do you expect a different response? No. Is it a very human reaction? Yes. Mm-hmm. And I wish we could handle this with a little bit more empathy. And I have empathy to everyone involved. That includes London, because I fucking hate when people don't give under-resourced teams that are striking up not their laurels. They should be getting all the respect in the world.
Look at this. We all had Spitfire 13 and they're fucking dominating now.
And they're fucking pounding.
Major respect. No, major respect. Talk about a team, and then you look at where we all put Justice 8-7-8.
Yep.
I mean, I think that's a very, very accurate place to put them. So I just think it's like so overblown, the hate towards them and the disappointment towards them, when like, I don't know, I don't think any Boston fan is extremely upset that they're in 10th. No. Maybe some of them are, but like I think they know that's where they are.
Yeah.
It just is what it is. Like,
why do we not have a shitstorm about Rain? I mean, we had them 3rd, 2nd, and 5th, and they're like 2, 4, 6, 7th.
No, Yiska, you don't understand. People only have shitstorms about Rain when Gator tweets.
Yeah.
Other than that, they're fine.
I mean, there's a commonality here. It's when people respond publicly is when people get real mad.
Gator wished Fran a happy birthday, and people were fucking fuming.
Lol, NFT couple, lol. Like, go away, bro.
It's like,
I get it. You don't like NFTs.
I'm not defending NFTs. I don't like NFTs either. I don't like NFTs, but I also don't give a fuck about
exactly.
Life. That's their thing. He's allowed to wish his girlfriend a happy birthday.
It's so
It's
weird.
got nothing to do with me. I don't like NFTs. I don't care about NFTs. I have no desire to be ever involved in NFTs or anything of that relation. But I also just don't. I also can just choose not to engage with someone wishing their girlfriend a happy birthday. It's such a weird champ thing to be fuming and angry about. Like, come on, guys. Are we that bored? It's July and people like, 4th of July is over. What's the next thing I can be angry about? Oh, Gator wished his girlfriend a happy birthday. Get on Twitter. I don't know. So yeah, I just think like if you view Washington Justice through the lens of this is a mid team performing where they're expected to perform, it just is what it is. That's why would it be cool if they were doing a little better? Would I like to see a team with Happy and Decay perform better? Absolutely. But considering this, like, if you're viewing, I don't know. I think everyone has just majorly. I'm overrated the Justice. I'm still very curious as to where people think the Justice are. And again, I'll say this one more time: anybody that puts them above 7th or you have overrated this team, and that's your fucking problem.
No,
you overrated this team.
And
Sorry.
I'm interested as to like why that is, because I agree, and that's kind of what. And for those who are unaware, sometimes there is a community. You know, we ring the bells of hell, and we summon the Yiska, and we have some pretty fruitful discussions randomly, which we did last night, kind of around the same subject. And it feels like we're circling around this same point regarding where we put them in terms of power rankings. And at least for me, I won't speak for you guys. I'm interested to hear what you guys think, but I put them where they were. I think I put them around 7th or 8th, like you guys mentioned. In some ways begrudgingly. I knew exactly where they were going to finish, but I don't think on paper that's where they should finish. And that's where I come to like Yiska's point of like, they're not a top 5 team. I think on paper they very well could be a top 5 team. I think there are very intangible problems with this team that limits them from being top 5.
Let me go into the hive mind of Reddit for a second.
Sure.
Well, the next thing they're going to say is like, "Oh, what about London? London came 4th. They're overperforming. Why can't the Justice just do that?" And acting like every motherfucking team
just overperform.
Like, the guy's like, "Oh yeah, look, London's up there. Why isn't Guangzhou? Why isn't Vancouver up there? DPay, DPay must fucking suck. Why is Vancouver not the same as London? London did it. That's such an unfair example to use, and I think even disrespectful to London and Christopher because the amount of work and what they were able to achieve is like it's an outsized achievement that is not common at all. It is a very rare occurrence for this kind of thing to happen, and like using that as now like some sort of example that everyone can just do this. Like if Spitfire can do it, then Justice could do it. Like that's just a weird champ thing to say as well. It's just like it's like what, because Spitfire did really well and overperformed every team now should just overperform. Like I don't understand that either. So I don't know. We can celebrate. People should be able to celebrate Spitfire without shitting on everyone else.
Yep.
Now, to more go back to addressing some of the actual back and forth on the Twitter. I understand where all this comes from because Pre speaks out. And when you're a losing team and you speak out and you're naming issues, immediately you look like you're either complaining or you are making excuses. And we saw the same thing when Brad Seffi did this last year when anytime Atlanta got knocked out of Hawaii, everyone's like, "Oh, you're just."
And before that, it was Flame.
It's like, I mean, you could view it that way, but they're also not wrong.
No,
like let's consider the fact that all the problems with last year's Hawaii stuff with the points. I mean, it was taken into account to the point where this year we actually do count, qualification points in, like, as in if you make the tournament, you just get a point now. Like that's like actual results have actual tangible changes that have been made based on things that were legitimate issues. I don't know. I don't feel like it shouldn't be the case that only winning teams are allowed to complain.
And it's
almost like you're not allowed to complain unless you're winning, because if you write about an issue and you're losing, people just say you're making an excuse and they're making fun of you. It's like, so what? People that are losing are no longer allowed to outline problems.
That's actually true. That's actually true, Avril, because the only reason we see thread after thread after thread about the bonus points counting towards the Y being bullshit is because Seffi made it from a position of winning and said like, oh yeah, this is a problem.
This isn't fair.
If this was a team that is in that position, it would go, oh, read the rules and adjust your strategy. That's the problem.
That's the crazy thing. Is he made it from a position of winning, but also losing, and so people still like dogpiled them. Because they were winning enough to make the tournaments 3 times even. But losing in the tournaments to the point where they weren't getting points in the tournaments, and then people were like fucking dogpiled them for that.
And real quick, I will say, other general managers have come forward and said like, this is not, this is not an instance where Pre now just like throws everything out with this throws the kitchen sink of excuses out. Like these issues have been brought up internally. There's nothing new. Everyone that like things that APAC general managers complained about is like quality of practice, not having enough opponents to practice about. The situations of ranked mode is something that's talked to death.
Sure.
Like nobody from the dev team really engaging much anymore with Overwatch League players. Maybe some of that is down to like them sort of being going a little bit too hard, but at the same time, like, I mean, it's to be expected to a degree, right? I think like the stats lab situation is like neither the ranked nor the stats lab situation is something that they can fully discard responsibility on. And that I also said this in my tweet. Here's the thing. It is totally fine for me to accept that you as a developer absolutely cannot afford to give meaningful resources to fixing these issues at this point, because your game is on its ass and you're trying to make a deadline. And boy, if we don't meet any of those deadlines, like it's not a matter of competitive integrity. It's can we keep the lights on in this motherfucker, right? So that's completely fine. But this league has also made it a point to shut down all avenues by which we could have solved that problem over the last couple of years. We had third-party developers that are absolutely capable to take the entire chunk of data that Overwatch replays generate and filter out stats lab quality data, so we can support the teams, we can support fantasy, we can support their general viewer, right? We could have solved that. The same is true for the practice issue that we're facing. And to a degree, yes, you can say like the Overwatch players should just like be able to come together, organize this shit, and just like play with each other. The problem is there's never a culture created around this, and everyone tried to make 5 pence on creating a culture around that, being Faceit, other third-party organizers getting something like Pugs going, maybe even adding a little bit of, like a ladder with prize pool there that could have been great stream content. They were killed dead and told, like, we are controlling whatever is happening, and we don't want that. Actually, we don't even want you to be able to stream.
The Pugs.
The Pugs after a certain amount, right? Like, all of this is responsibility that you shut down the culture that could have alleviated these problems, and now shit hits the fan. It is your responsibility. I'm sorry, right? It's absolutely fine to point this out being a problem. And it's also fine saying, like, there's no great solutions and reiterating it at a later point. But come on, man, like, that humans in these situations where they're feeling the pressure are not feeling great about these shortcomings that could have been entirely avoided, have been repeatedly brought up for years, is entirely understandable. And I wish we had the capacity as the mob to give empathy in both of those situations. And more so than, like, I totally get, like, it's a fun meme, right? Like, for Christopher to post that.
Yeah,
I think it was maybe even meant a little bit more. I think there was something genuinely emotionally for Christopher there.
Sure.
And I haven't talked to him about this situation at all, by the way. Oh. But
he hasn't tweeted in 9 months. That was his first tweet in 9 months. So yeah, that's what he decided to come out with. Is like, it's been 9 months, guys. Time to shit on somebody. And
it's probably frustrating for him as well.
That
they aren't getting as much ups as they are, because they are like, this is the Cinderella story of the season. Like, this is incredible.
Who has not given them the ups?
I don't think people have really given them like enough credit. I think this is actually nuts. Yes,
I feel like people definitely have.
Yeah, I think now
I don't think so.
I think that at 3 now.
I don't know. I respect Christopher, but it did seem a little distasteful. It is a good meme. Like, the part of me that just wants to laugh at a meme was like, that's funny. But then part of me is like, man, Pre's one of the better dudes that we have in this scene.
Sure.
It's kind of rough to see that. And I don't even know, like, the conversation wasn't even about London.
No.
And that's the weird PR part about it.
It might have felt to them, though.
Completely fucked.
Because it was the core tweet, right?
What?
They might have felt that it was. the implication.
That's the thing is maybe it could have been implied. I just think it's like
and then playing each other.
The interpretation everyone has is that like this is the genuine interpretation some people have is like, oh, Pretty is salty that he lost or some shit like that. It's just like,
no.
I mean, let's even say that he is. Like, what's the issue with bringing up problems that are problems? Because you have to understand the context of this as well.
Yeah.
Is there are things that could have been done to improve the team, but a lot of those tools have been taken away. I mean, that's a legitimate thing to say. It's like, well, you know, these are things that we could have improved, but you know, we don't have these tools and we don't have these things to make those improvements. To which the public response is like, well, London didn't need them. It's like, but again, you know, we can't just copy paste London to 20 fucking teams. If it was really that easy, nobody would be bad, would they? So there is that, but also, you know, I'm not discounting the fact that maybe Washington do have coaching issues. I think maybe there's a misinterpretation from our message here as well, that we're just saying that no, everything in Justice is fine, everyone's just overblowing us. I'm not saying it is all fine.
I don't know.
There probably are issues. There probably are even coaching issues. I'm definitely not going out of the way to say I know exactly what those things are. And so when I have enough self-awareness to be like, you know, I'm not entirely sure what part of the coaching, you know, if it is a coaching issue, and I'm not entirely sure on these things, so I don't have all the facts. And then you have all these armchair people that are just like so unbelievably confident they know exactly what the issue is, like they're fucking actually in the room and they've seen it all when they haven't. Yeah, it's kind of mind-blowing, but I get fans are frustrated. I think if you are a Washington fan, you're probably frustrated, and I get it.
Yep.
But you know, when I look at the games that they played, what do we have here? New York, cool, they beat them. Houston 2-3, close loss. Okay, Toronto 1-3. Maybe they could have beaten Toronto, but Toronto is a better team. I've had them as a better team for a while. Glaz, they were never winning that. And then London 2-3. Like London's on a humongous upswing. I don't think it's a huge. Is that a who thinks that's an upset? How many people look at the London win and believe, oh man, what a huge upset from London? I don't think that's an upset.
Not this stage.
I think London winning that is even fairly expected. Everyone in the panel, you know, credited London. Everyone thought London was going to win this, and then London did, and everyone's upset about it for some reason. It's like, huh?
Yeah.
You all thought London was going to win this, and then they did, and now you're angry at Washington despite you already knowing that London was going to win this. I don't understand. Like,
that's weird.
So yeah, I don't think justice to go without any blame, but I think so much of this is just overblown. That's like the end message. So much of it is overblown.
Yeah.
And it gets to the point where, like, I mean, these teams are just going to stop communicating. I think that the biggest irony is you have all these players, you have all these fans, not these players, you have all these fans that are like, man, I wish the teams would communicate more. I wish they would tell us about things. I wish, you know, they would be open. And then they are, and then everyone shits on them.
And the team. Yeah. The shitting part is, my problem is that it feels very highly selective from let's just say some of the broadcast team, and namely Custer, where you should bring the same energy to New York.
I hope he does. I hope he continues.
Like, if you do that, I have no problem, right? Like, if you dish it out indiscriminately, then we have no problem. Then just become that, right? Like, we need that desperately. It just doesn't have to feel that so targeted for no apparent reason, right?
I'm going to bring up another team really quick. This is not me wanting to shit on them. I'm just using them as an example. So, you know, be aware of that context. But the Vancouver Titans, why are more people not upset that they are currently winless right now? I think here's the difference. I'll tell you why, because everyone expected them to be bad, and they're bad, and everyone's like, oh, they're just bad. Whereas, like, that's my argument for the justice. I expected them to be mid. They are mid, therefore I'm not upset.
And so, I'll let you in on a secret. Their budgets aren't too different.
So you're just to be clear for the public, just to reiterate this and be very, very transparent and very clear for clarification's sake, you're saying the Vancouver Titans and the Washington Justice have a similar budget?
And this isn't, by the way, this isn't his sources. I made it up. Yiska actually knows what he's talking about when he says this.
I mean,
he actually
within
knows.
Reasonable certainty percentage, yeah. They are both mid-tier, like, money teams. And I will say money means less nowadays than it used to. And we'll eventually talk about this as well.
You
but
know nothing?
Right.
People that are using, they're like, oh, but you have the decay and happy DPS duo energy. You should be doing way better than you are. Apply that same energy to Aspire and Shockwave, please.
Yeah.
Be consistent. If you're gonna talk about like, oh, decay and happy your team, you guys should be winning. Okay, Shockwave, Aspire, you guys should be winning, but you got fucking no wins. So no one's applying that energy to Titans. I'm not saying people should go and shit on Titans. Really, I would like it if no one, people just didn't shit on these teams in general. But I'm saying like there's major double standards, and I don't know what it is. Maybe some of my colleagues, my other talent on the broadcast have been like firing shots at the Justice, and so like everyone's like, well, if so and so is firing shots at the Justice, that's my permission to go do it on Twitter as well. Now all the fans are doing it. I don't know. I'm not trying to pass blame. I got to be careful with that one because I love everyone I work with, so I'm not trying to pass blame on anything. I'm just saying from a fan perspective, it's like, if a prominent figure starts firing shots, then that kind of gives everyone else
carte blanche to do so.
It's kind of permission to do so in a way, like indirectly. Anyway, yeah.
I'll also say I'd much rather be a Justice fan than a Toronto Defiant fan. Maybe not this season. But generally, in the history of the Overwatch League, like for the Justice, at least had some exciting runs, even in playoffs, where you could believe for a moment. I've never for a second, other than Stage 1, Season 2, believed in the Toronto Defiant's ability to win like a playoff match. And they did once, but once. Like,
and that's what's equally frustrating about the Defiant, that I feel like they get to skate under the rug so nasty about this. If we're talking budgets, if we're talking payrolls, we want to talk money. You want to talk money, Defiant?
Yeah.
I don't think you get to have any. You better keep your head down. I don't want to see anybody subtweet. No motherfuckers better be piping up, because you have a wallet, my friend. You got some explaining to do by the end of the season. If ever some details start to come out in terms of money spent, I think we've got
the two biggest teams, factually speaking, that have underperformed the heaviest based on actual budget is Toronto and Vancouver. Factually speaking, not Justice. Toronto and Vancouver have underperformed the highest by discrepancy based on what their budget is.
I think that probably is fair.
That's speaking from facts, and not just some Redditor saying it and repeating it from somewhere else. So, yeah. But this isn't, again, I don't want to turn this into let's start shitting on Toronto or Vancouver kind of thing. I would love it if no one shat on anybody. I just think it's like
and to be fair, both of those teams have made changes, right? Significant ones.
Justice is
partially because they're allowed.
Like I said, those teams made blood sacrifices, and they've satiated King Kong for now. And so everyone wants blood out of the Justice. Like, you have to fucking carve somebody's heart out and fucking raise it up to the sun god and then throw it off the pyramid. That's what the people want right now. They want a witch to burn on the stake.
Yeah.
They don't care if this person is actually a witch or not. They just want to see somebody burn.
And real fast, my last point on all of this is I feel like my biggest gripe is that nobody else is getting targeted, and I feel like they should be. And I feel like at least on this platform, we've been targeting those who need penalties drawn. However,
you just gotta do sacrifice every time. We go through the cycle of Toronto, Boston, Vancouver, and all that. It's like Puck's gone, Bobby and Pew is gone, KDG's gone, and then when people get bored of the Justice, they go back and it's like, who's gonna be the next team that has to do another sacrifice? Oh, I think we should now you got to target Moby Dick, you got to target DPay, now you got to target Laurie or whoever the fuck you just gotta cycle through the different things you want to target.
And I feel horrible for coaches in this league. I think they have very little agency when it comes to like some of their job security. So I do feel for them, but I do think there are some positions that need to be shifted. However, with the Justice, I do want to bring up an idea. I'll use a loose concept that I'm going to steal from LS about like the Pokemon and the badges, right? If you don't have you have too high of a level Pokemon, let's say, right? You won't be able to control it without the right appropriate amount of badges earned, right? I think we've all experienced a Pokemon game. Hopefully this is a little bit more ubiquitous than it sounds. With the Justice roster and the way that it looks, and I said this last season, and I'll say it again, something about this roster stinks. Not going to name who I think it is. It's not really my place, but something about it smells. And I don't think this coaching staff is apt for the job to control that roster, right? Pokemon and badges. So I would like to see some significant changes when it comes to this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm not saying there should be no change. I think there's
no. I know you're not.
I'm trying to play both sides a little bit. I'm trying to argue for and against and be a little bit even if it seems like maybe I'm not. I'm actually trying to be objective here, which is to say that there is something wrong in the justice. I don't, but I am also self-aware enough to say that I don't actually know what it is. That's why I'm not calling for anyone's job or anyone's head. I'm not specifically calling for any sacrifice of anybody specifically because I don't know what the fucking problem is.
Right.
But maybe they should make a change. I don't know what the change should be, but maybe they should make a change. I think Supreme's an easy scapegoat. All right, he's been the one the target line. He's been one of the firing line. He's a super easy scapegoat. Maybe it is him. Maybe it isn't. I'm not at liberty to say because I'm not a part of the fucking team. I legitimately don't know.
Yeah.
Dude, it could be a player issue. Maybe there's a fucking shitty player on the team that's dragging everyone down. Who knows? You know, it apparently took 4 years for people to realize that Strike was a shitty teammate. I mean, bro, like this is who the fuck knows. So I'm defending the justice on some level to say that like some of the hate they're getting is unwarranted. But I'm also not saying that you like can't be frustrated at them. I think it's very justified that people are frustrated at them, and I can, you know, on some level, I can fully understand the frustration because like, you know, if you think Decay is an insane player, you are probably a bit upset that his team is performing badly. But I just think that the amount of witch hunting is fucking crazy is my problem with all of this. I'm not saying they don't have issues, but I'm saying like people are so confident that they know what the issue is, and they think they know it better than the team does, and that's just wild to me. I don't know.
And I guess to round out like my entire thought process here, I will say, I mean, and I think Pre knows as well, those 2 last tweets should have stuck in drafts. Do what I do. Get yourself like a nice confidential Discord channel where you have like a channel, I call it Stuck in Drafts. And I just like take the tweet I want to reply to, write out the tweet that already feels cathartic. I got it written out. And then I shared with a select few people I trust to understand my point while also feeling secure that it isn't getting out. And now I'm getting all the good dopamine shots from having actually not sent the tweet.
Yes.
Yiska. You know, the sad thing about that is all that means is like, you know, teams just communicate to the fans less and less.
That's true.
Because it is literally a lose-lose game now where if you're a staff member of a team and you try and be open, you try and be transparent, people just shit on you because you know, even if you the craziest one was like a few years back when you guys remember Dream on Houston. This one was so overblown. He's like, yeah, man, like we did well in scrims. This is kind of weird. And I felt like that was like a maybe I'm misremembering it and I'm applying more benefit of the doubt than I should. But all I remember was that he said something along the lines of like, yeah, we did well in scrims, so you know, like these losses are kind of strange or whatever. And people were like fucking going in on him. I'm like, what is this? Like he's just giving some context of like, yeah, it's just, you know, we're underperforming, we did better in scrims, you know, and now we lost, and people were fucking furious at that. I'm like, what? Like, why are people angry? Like, it's just so weird. It's like when somebody is a staff member that actually, because again, all these fans are like, man, I wish teams were more transparent. And then the team becomes transparent. They tell you things, and the response is always fucking negative. It's always backlash. So why should any team be transparent when the entire history of being transparent has only netted negative results? Right? There's like 0 point in being transparent because you're either going to give your opponents insight into your team that they can strategize over, or usually it's both. The fans shit on you anyway.
Yeah.
So just never say anything, and then you'll see like comments later on. Reddit's like, "Oh man, these teams don't tell us anything," and it's like, "Yeah, because of you."
I wonder why
they don't tell you things because of you. Your behavior is why they don't tell you things.
It is very benevolent to be vulnerable, and that's exactly what that is. And to your point, Yiska, I think it is advice for most people, just generally, esports or not, that social media probably should not be used as a venting tool. Find a circle, find a support system, and vent to them. You will probably save yourself a lot of brain cells.
Yeah. and I should take my own advice more because I've been on a Reddit hill for.
You should.
Jesus Christ.
For a lifetime, it feels like. For a lifetime, my friend.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just like.
It's hard not to. I get it.
Yeah, it's a hard human situation, and I think there's also something. The thing is, like, let's be honest. Us saying like the bad mob. It's almost an animate object without morals that just moves, that cannot be swayed, and should just be considered a force of nature, unfortunately, right? And the only way that you could realistically like change a little bit about it is have like a united front of people with status in this scene just coming together and saying, you know, guys, like, we got to course correct in order to have a better product for you guys. Here's like X, Y, and Z, why, like, we want to be open with you, but like, because this is shut down, and then as people realize what they're getting in exchange is actually worth the price, which is the price being we can't just indiscriminately shit on everyone, and also we kind of keep ourselves in check by shouting down the people that are shouting others down, then it could be, but let's be honest, like, this is not the scene for this to happen. If anything, it's one of the worst scenes in terms of like unfair criticism.
Well, there's too many bad faith actors that, like, you know, they don't care about nuance or context. Again, they just want to see somebody burn at the stake, and that's all it is. So I mean,
yeah.
I mean,
and maybe not more can. Yeah, maybe more can't be expected from a guy that comes home from work, wants to say the team play, and like they just shit the bed. From his point of view, he doesn't really understand it, doesn't have the muse to really invest. It's just his way of venting. It almost feels like gamified, and it's good to be aware of that, you know.
So, ending this topic now as we're like really deep in. I did say in our little pre-podcast, for those that don't know, we do a 2-hour rehearsal for the podcast, and then we do the actual podcast. You know, I did say that we were gonna spend probably a long time on this one, just because there's a lot to get out there.
Yeah.
And if you sat through this whole thing, well done. But yeah, to get ahead of some comments that are not going to be out there, I know it does seem like we're probably downplaying the justice situation, but part of the reason for that is because I think it's been overblown anyway. So because it's so overblown, it's like, is it really even downplaying? I think I'm just playing it to the neutral. I'm playing it to where it's supposed to be rated at, which is in the 7th to 9th range is where I rated at. And again, if you rated above that, I don't know what to tell you. You've overrated this team. So that's kind of on you. I don't know. That's it. Mid team has mid results. The internet goes wild. Internet is fuming at mid team that has mid results. Okay, so let's talk about some of the actual games that happened. Let's start with the Washington Justice. Just kidding. We already talked about it. Who wants to start? Do we get into the APAC stuff first or the NA stuff first? I'm actually...
I mean, if you had some interesting things to say. I think there was definitely a team that I was very... Actually, you want to...
let's do APAC and let's change the subject. We feel like we've been on the NA talk for a while now, and I can only do so much of that. APAC talk. Shanghai are back, baby, or are they? Are they actually back? Joe, you wrote a big ass article on this. I casted the games, and bro, they look back to me. And there's some commentary out there that says like, man, how can you believe that Shanghai are back when they just like they've only been winning for 2 games? And my counter response would be, how could you be down on Shanghai when they've been only losing for 2 games?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it's like the same shit. It's like we all forgot that in Kickoff Clash, they not only nearly made the finals, but probably should have made the finals or should have won the whole thing anyway. I'm not saying Seoul shouldn't have won. I'm super happy that Seoul won.
Yeah.
Very happy that Seoul won. But the fine margins between the Seoul and Shanghai game, the lower final for Kickoff Clash, were so fine that any team could have made it.
Sure.
So to be revisionist and be like, oh man, but Shanghai have been bad this whole time. It's like, no, they haven't.
They definitely haven't.
They lost to Philly, had some close games with his other teams, and were the only team to be even minutely close to Seoul Dynasty by the end of the Kickoff Clash. And then they had 2 bad games to open up Midseason Madness with. And now they've had 2 great games in the Midseason Madness and 2 more games still yet to play. And so to me, for my money, Shanghai have been more often a better team so far this season than a bad one.
They haven't. 100%.
When I say Shanghai are back, I'm saying they slumped for 2 games and now they've returned to top form. And so the people that are trying to like counter dunk and be like, well, how can you say they're back when, you know, they've only won twice? It's like, you've just fucking forgotten about the whole kickoff clash, haven't you? You're just being revisionist, aren't you? Is what I'm saying to that.
Yeah, I think to that point, I think we were trying to spot a trend last show, right? Like in terms of form, Shanghai did like those were some bad games. Those were rough. And we speculated on if that was an omen, a sign of things to come. And it was very clear, at least to me, it sounds like for you as well, that is not the case. And Shanghai is still a world-class team and has come out in week 3 and just put the hurt on people. Noticeable changes being the reintroduction of Lee Jae-gon and Fate back into the roster. Surprise, surprise. The main tank with the least respect in the entire Overwatch League continues to impress the world. Surprise Pikachu face. I don't know. I don't get how we're constantly always just like baffled and surprised that Fate comes in and actually performs well. If you want to get more nuanced, maybe there was a lower evaluation of where Wrecking Ball is at the start of the meta. I think that's fair. Maybe an over evaluation of the double flex support. I think that's fair. Maybe not giving Lee Jae-gon respect, because I think you've been very publicly talking about and stating about how talented he is when it comes to more traditional or more picks that have been outside the traditional main support kind of Rolodex. So I think this team is back into at least plateaued, if not trending upwards. I would say trending upwards personally. I think they're probably coming into, I'll save predictions for predictions episode. But yeah, no, I was very pleasantly surprised. You know, looking at their VODs, I thought that they addressed the issue perfectly. I hinted on, or not hinted on it, but I think I pointedly said last show, and it came from a lot of what Moon had said as well, that they looked directionless. They looked without a leader. Moon comes out and says something very similar, where the way that they were approaching the game was lower on proactivity, more reactive, and that was very much shifted. That was completely flipped on its head. They were the team leading the charge. They were the team being proactive. They were first to touch. And look what happens. Yes, if you want to comment on Philly's strength, if you want to comment on Valiant's strength, that's fine. But then if you want to reflect it, and I mentioned this much in the article, to NA, where you have New York Excelsior finding their footing, taking Dallas, a team that I think a lot of people respect, to a game 5. You have Boston taking Florida, another team that I think people are learning to respect, to a game 5. London, Washington, game 5. It is hard to just sweep teams right now. This meta is very difficult to just like wallop somebody and move on. Like 3-0s are not, they don't feel like a common occurrence. I have no numbers to support that, but it doesn't feel like a common occurrence. So for Shanghai to be able to do that and take some teams that are fairly competitive, it says something.
Even on the eye test, and here's the other thing that people have said about Shanghai. I was like, oh yeah, but they just beat up on bad teams, which first and foremost, ouch for Philly. I don't think Philly are a bad team. I think, you know, they are a team that very comfortably well above average in APAC and have often at points performed extremely well. But they've also suffered some especially bad losses to the actual top teams, which are Shanghai and Seoul, understandably. But even if, okay, let's say that, okay, sure, Valiant, you can say is a bad team, I'll give you that. And you're like, oh, well, Shanghai just 3-0 dunking on Valiant doesn't mean anything. But on the eye test, if you look at what Shanghai are doing, and I specifically cast that game, and it's just like, the way Shanghai are playing is fundamentally flawless. Like, they are doing everything to the absolute peak of what you should be doing at all times from an analytical, strategic point of view. That, like, I don't care that the level of competition was the Valiant. I care that, like, are they playing their game well on an eye test level, on a strategic level? So that matters, because if I can see a team doing that, that means I know they've got everything under lock in terms of all the fundamentals, their knowledge of matchups and strategy and all sorts of those kind of things, decision making, individual prowess and mechanics. Does it all line up? You know, there's because we've often said on this podcast, there's 3-0s and then there's, oh shit, that's a 3-0.
Yeah.
Right. And I think Shanghai even elevated the, oh shit, that's a 3-0 to like, oh my fucking god, that was the most flawless 3-0 I've ever seen.
Yep.
Like utterly flawless, right? Not to say that Valiant won 0 fights. Valiant won a couple fights there, but like that's within the fair margins of a team.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I'm not talking about a team that is literally spawn camping, because spawn camping would not even be perfect play because it doesn't show anything.
Yeah.
You want to actually see a little bit of pushback. So when I say flawless, I mean flawless in the sense that, like, even with Valiant doing a little bit of pushback, you see Shanghai's response. Like, okay, what is the most optimal response? What are they meant to be doing in these situations? They did everything that I would have expected, and that what I would believe is the correct decision making to make from a strategic point of view. So yeah, I'm like, if Valiant do these things, what was Shanghai's response strategy? All perfect. Like, every decision they made in response to Valiant was fantastic. And so just seeing how they played up against Valiant and the decisions they made gave me a lot of confidence that they know what the fuck they're doing, regardless of the competition.
Yeah, no, it's been flawless from Shanghai, and I think it'll continue. Not much else for me there. Looks good.
Yeah, it's reassuring that they have this ability, and like that it isn't necessarily down to Overwatch 2 that they have been, you know, in struggle city.
Yiska, I got one thing for you, Yiska, really quick. You know, one thing that actually happened in between Shanghai struggling for 2 games and then winning for 2 games is the Overwatch 2 beta coming. And Lip even specifically saying in an interview, like, yeah, practicing Sojourn in the beta. Like, yep.
Yeah.
I mean, this is one of those you talked about, like, some teams, they're either naturally talented or they're just grinders. I think Shanghai is a bit of both in there. But for sure, like, grinding, even Moon said this in his interview, like, grinding is part of their, you know, ability to get good, and not having the ability to grind definitely cost them something. And, you know, lo and behold, the beta comes back and they get to grind a little bit. Lip goes from looking tragic on Sojourn to looking like a fucking god.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and like, grind as an ability is like a talent not to be underestimated, right? Like, and if that's shut down, like, you can't, it's very hard to shut down like natural talent. So for instance, like, one thing that I often hear is like, a player like Twilight gets away with less practice than others just because he's naturally talented, right?
Sure.
Like, some players just need episode hours in order to be on top of their game. And there's like, for DPS players, especially like hit scans, bro, one missed aim lab day might just fuck up your aim for weeks. If you're an absolute aim beast, that might actually be the problem that breaks you. You cannot afford to slack. This is unfortunately like how a special skill works. And then, like, we sometimes have like, oh yeah, by the way, the 10% thing on DPS is now gone, and now you need to like relearn your muscle memory and whatnot, you know, like,
yeah.
And now you're playing in a beta where there's another hero that you don't even play against in the Overwatch League. So you know, like, it's all not optimal, but it's very obvious that this will all have an impact on the level of play. And I think to a degree we already saw that when like contenders teams got access in APAC, and like the overall level of play increasing there, which is why, you know, the midseason will be very interesting to see. But it's also like, just for the general towards the narrative towards the midseason, it's kind of important that we have a strong Shanghai there, like, because it's if it's really only like Seoul, because I don't trust Spark to, like, as far as I can throw them.
Sure.
Right? I'm not saying they might not have a tournament run. I'm saying that's not the APAC team that I want to, you know, hedge my bets with. So, like, 3 strong APAC teams would be super sweet at midseason.
Yeah. Need some representation from that side of the world, because I mean, it doesn't surprise me that NA fans don't credit them, but
even Philly is like, people underrate Philly hard.
Sure.
I don't mind all the NA fans underrating Hangzhou and Philly, because, I mean, I'm not saying Hangzhou and Philly are going to beat Gladiators or anything anytime soon, but people are acting like these teams will just lose to London. I'm just like, what the fuck? Like, I don't know. Like, there's some weird stuff out there. Like, people, I'm gonna try and not be super hyperbolic about this, but I swear to God, some of the sentiment I see out there is that, like, outside of Shanghai and Seoul, people think every other team in APAC would just be below Florida or Toronto or something. I'm like, yikes.
No.
Let's play a tournament where the number 1 team from APAC and the number 1 team from NA, the very bottom team from APAC, the very bottom team from NA, and then like one team fucking smack bang in the middle number 7 NA versus number 4 APAC, and just have those 3 games as a show match, and we'll see who wins.
Yeah.
What does your middle of the pack look like versus our middle of the pack? What is your bottom versus our bottom? What is your top versus our top? You know, straight up. And we'll see. And I think I'd be pretty confident to say our middle and our bottom would beat NA's bottom and middle. Easily as well.
I think a lot of that stems from just like the casual fans not watching, and then even like the semi-regular fans just seeing something different and just, you know, applying this logic.
The fact that people think Ryan is good is like mind blowing to me.
Sure.
I say this on Plat Chat as well. I was like, how the fuck does anyone think Ryan is good? And I'm not trying to downplay London. I think London is special because they have Hardy, they have Backbone, they have the best pieces to make the Ryan look much better than it is, and they are single-handedly making Ryan look amazing. When the truth is, and fuck, even Spillo has said this, Ryan's like, it's probably not even that good. They just make it work.
Yep.
You know, but that shit's even got a leash on it because when you look at London games, they're not even playing Ryan full time. They're playing Hardy on Winston. They're playing Poco in half these games. They don't even play Ryan full time, and this is the Ryan team. So like this whole Ryan talk is so over. And I've some of the comments, some of the shit I'm hearing, like, oh yeah, but APAC doesn't know how to deal with the Ryan. It's like, motherfucker, they destroyed the Ryan last year. The Ryan was a fucking joke last year. What do you mean they don't know how to deal with the Ryan? We have fucking literal footage, a year's worth of footage from last year that shows that they do know how to deal with the Ryan.
Yep. Would like to see
so Shanghai back.
Would like to see
Shanghai back.
Yes,
Shanghai
very much
legitimate back.
Should be coasting into mid-season and ready to take on the likes of Blitz and Shock.
Who's better, Shanghai or Seoul?
Seoul.
Still?
Yeah, I'd say so.
Like I need easily, or is it like
it's a lot closer now. I need a little bit more testing, and I think we get that, you know, come week 4 with Chengdu, Shanghai. I think that's going to be like a really nice litmus test to really kind of see where Shanghai is sitting. I think Philly is a tough opponent. I think Valiant are competitive, but I think, you know, this new form needs to be properly, you know, tested in terms of hardness. There's a word for that. There's a test.
If Shanghai 3-0 Chengdu, it's over. They're winning. They're winning Midseason Madness.
Yep.
They're winning Midseason Madness. Straight up.
That's a scary dragon.
The NA sentiment will be like, oh my god, APAC's so bad. Chengdu got 0-3 by Dragons, who were a shit team. Like, that'll be the NA Andy sentiment because they don't know anything. And then they'll be really surprised when Shanghai win the whole thing.
Like, and then when Shanghai wins the whole thing, it's going to be, oh, well, you know, it's not necessarily fair that, you know, NA teams have to play against APAC because they don't, like, how are you supposed to practice for that style? Like, it's just not, you can't, how are you supposed to adapt, like, compete?
What's funny about that joke, you know, the irony about that is these same fans that will shit on the coaches and staff will then make the exact same excuses for the teams.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They will shit on the people making the excuses, and then they will make the same excuses. That's funny to me.
Yeah. Yep. Shanghai's pretty good.
I think okay, you're not ready for this. I think Shanghai might even be better than Seoul.
Ooh.
Is that crazy? And that's crazy because from watching them both play, there's a level of finesse and quality, and again flawlessness. You know, when I compare the diamonds and I'm looking for imperfections.
His jeweler glasses, he's really getting
shit under the microscope. I'm like, bro, Dragons are just not making mistakes. They're doing everything flawlessly. Even when they're losing fights flawlessly. And that's a real thing, by the way. It's not just me talking shit. They're losing fights because they want to lose fights. This shit is flawless. They're saving ultimates. They're not doing these things. They're playing for like very long strategic games with high level of economic understanding of like all the flow and effects of like, okay, we can lose this fight, then we do this next fight, and then the flow chart of doing a separate thing on the third fight based on decisions you make 3 fights in advance. These things are all happening on the Dragon side of things, that even when they're losing fights, there's a strategic component to that where they want to do that for some purpose in the future that then they can cash in on. And these are things that I'm picking up on during the cast, and then hopefully I'm also saying them if I have time. I think I do sometimes say it. It's just stuff like, you know, watching them play against Valiant, some of the fights they lose against Valiant, I'm like, bro, this shit is actually planned. Like, you can actually see the different cogs turning in terms of why they're making these decisions and how they're doing things. Because it's the perfect game of Overwatch is not about like we have 0 deaths, we've never lost a fight, and we're just spawn camping. That's not a perfect game of Overwatch. A perfect game of Overwatch is having such a strategic command of your opponents that everything you do leads to an ideal win condition, an optimal win condition. That includes losing fights, dying, losing players, losing fights, but also doing that in a way that still leads to an ideal end win condition. That's flawless to me. So that's kind of what I'm talking about.
Losing quickly, maybe taking players with you, trading up in advantageous situations, forcing these ults. You know, these are all things that teams, high-end teams, I shouldn't say all teams, high-end teams take into very serious consideration when planning these fights. And a lot of the times that comes from the players. A lot of the times the players are the ones setting those plays. It's not everybody, but it's like, you know, the in-game leader.
And some of this flow charting from the Shanghai Dragons is like more advanced than what I've seen out of Seoul in terms of like macro strategy.
Okay.
Now, I don't doubt that Seoul individually have some unreal talent currently that can easily compete with the Dragons, if not be better. I also think Dragons losing 0-3 to Seoul kind of sours the belief in Dragons a little bit, because like, oh, well, they did get smashed by Seoul, but you know, this is before Beta came out, Beta 2 rather. And I just can't wait for that rematch. I think that rematch is going to be fucking amazing. It's going to be so good, because that was not the real Shanghai we watched versus Dynasty. Now this is. So yeah, I'm so bought in on the Shanghai Dragons. I'm unbelievably bought in on the Shanghai Dragons right now.
I think it's fair to be.
My only concern is what happens on maps where it's more ideal to play Voids, Heroes, than Fates. That's my one big concern. Because I don't think you can one-trick a Ball or a Winston through the whole meta. And there are going to be situations where it's more ideal to play like a Sigma. So can they still bring in Void after this?
And I think you're going to have that answered. If not next week, I would assume, again, I think a lot of these escort maps are very like, okay, we want that Sigma. Okay, maybe the Zarya, and at least in APAC, they're a little bit more, you know, open to the idea of playing a Zarya. Yeah, like we're really going to see. Again, week 1 was we have a read, it did not work. Week 2 was okay, we have found what works. Week 2, week 3, week 4 is seeing that in fluid motion against some pretty high caliber teams. One of which is the Chengdu Hunters, the other of which is not a high caliber team. It is the Guangzhou Charge, and they are kind of poop. But that is to be saved for, I guess, another episode or predictions.
I'll ask Yiska if he's going to eat final thoughts on the Dragons before we move on.
No, but like I feel like that I have a little bit more reservations, because like it has only been 2 very impressive matches, but it's also not too long ago that they went 0-6, right? And we have a pretty understandable reason as to why that happens. I'm cautiously optimistically.
Ditto.
Again, because I've like really dissected the flow charting of the Dragons, I don't think a team could do that unless they were in optimal form. Is my end conclusion, which is why I'm so big on them. I would be a lot more hesitant as well if I feel like, but they weren't super clean wins, or I just feel like they're still just kind of floundering and they just got lucky off X or Y things, or like one person's carrying hard. But I saw a legitimate 5-member hive mind working in fluid motion where everything was working towards an end goal of a win condition. The way I described Dragons last year and how flawless they played as a 6 was that no movement, no input was wasted. Every single thing they did in terms of moving around the map had an outcome they were looking towards. There was no wasted moment of them just floundering, waiting around, sitting on their hands. And if they ever chose to do that and play slowly, it was for a purpose that, again, leads to an end result that is a win condition. So every decision they made led to that. And so I was looking for that. Whenever I watch Dragons, I'm looking for that again. And for the first time this year, I felt like I saw it, which is why I'm so excited about them. That's why I'm big on them.
Yeah.
Looking forward to midseason. Again, both teams kind of locked it up already. Shanghai coming in, I think, still fighting for some seeding. But they're going to be there. They're going to be there fighting with some of the best teams from North America. And we will see those styles clash. And that is what is exciting about the Midseason Madness. It's exciting when most esports have, you know, these international competitions. It's seeing the different styles. It's seeing them compete.
I'm going to bring up one more conversation on the APAC side of things before we move on. Two questions. Who is going to get in between Fusion and Hunters, and who should get in? between Fusion and Hunters. Who will get in terms of like where the points are at, what the conditions are for entry, and then more importantly, like points aside, Fusion Hunters play. I don't know how many games you want them to play, and the best team moves forward. Who should be moving forward, and who is going to move forward, and are they the same team?
Chengdu has to win both games. Philly has to win one or win both to get in. Correct?
If Philly win both, they're automatically in. Hunters out no matter what.
Okay.
If Fusion win one, Hunters have to win two, and then we go down to tiebreaker.
Okay.
If
so
Fusion wins 0, then Hunters will have to like win.
This is tough.
1 to get in. I think Hunters would only have to win 1 to get in. If Fusion wins 0 or something like that.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, no. Hunters would have to win 1, and then it would go to tiebreaker.
Philly plays Charge to open the week, so that's already like okay. That's a
dub.
gimme.
That's got to be a dub.
That's a dub. And then Chengdu then, because we've given Philly 1, Chengdu then it has to win 2, if I'm understanding the math right. And Chengdu plays Dragons, and they play Spark. Those are tough games.
Which, by the way, I love that the Hunters game is immediately following the Fusion game.
Yes.
Because when I'm on that day, I'm going to be casting this. The storyline is, guys, if Fusion win this game versus Charge, which they're heavily favored to do, Hunters have to go flawless now, and then Fusion will beat the Charge, and then the next game I'm like, well, because Fusion beat the Charge, guys, Hunters have to win this game.
Yep.
They have to win this game. So, great setup there narratively from the schedulers, even though they did that by complete accident.
Yeah.
But I love it. Anyway.
And I think those are some of the best stories, the organic ones that just kind of form the day of or through the schedule. I think that's some of the most exciting, matches to tune into to that point where it's like, yeah, Chengdu now have a double must-win scenario if we're going to play out the schedule like we think it will. Like Philly beats Guangzhou. Chengdu, that's a tough game to play against the Dragons. And then they have to play the Spark, which I'm a little bit more I'm open to seeing that probably go their way. So I think that spells out that Philly probably makes it. But should they? I don't think so. I think Chengdu is the better team at the moment and probably should be making it to the Midseason Madness. But unlucky when it comes to the, the rubber band of the kickoff clash point. I believe that is really hindering them because if you took one away from Philly, well, I guess you'd probably take multiple away, but that's also not fair.
Let's get to who should make it.
Yeah.
Points aside, who's the better team?
I think Chengdu does.
I'm not sure, man. I'd rather have the chance to see Philly peak because I think that was higher this season.
Is it higher this stage though? Well, who's the better team right now?
I mean, I think you have to say Hunters.
Yeah.
I think you do.
Hunters also beat Fusion the stage.
Yeah.
They've had better results overall, going 2-3 versus Seoul in a super winnable game. Philly also lost to Valiant, which Hunters beat. All these things compound towards a result that says Hunters on paper are a better team. That doesn't mean that Fusion can't recover and improve as we get through. So I'm not fully down on Fusion.
No, not at all. But like gun to head, Chengdu, I think fits this meta in a very, very weird way very well. I think this patch in general is the Nutrigrain, the fertilizer for individual plays, and Chengdu loves the pop off. Jinmu is feasting. Sleeve is feasting. Gaga feasting. They are eating this up. They love to make plays. Are they doing it on a wonky hero? Of course, it wouldn't be the Chengdu Hunters if they weren't. So,
the good news is,
I think they are. Yeah,
I don't see how it's too different from Shanghai just relying on Fate right now. Like if you are Hunters and just solo and just like fully relying on Gaga to play ball and Winston, that's exactly what Shanghai are doing. Now the concern for both teams is that enough? To get you through? Because some maps I do think Sigma is like the ideal pick, and that impacts both teams because if you're Hunters, you have to sub in Daisy. And if you're Shanghai, you have to sub in Void. That sounds weird that we're like, oh no, you don't want to sub in Void, but just like, I don't know, being a little bit of PTSD from their first week, having Void, Bebe on the team.
It's a little rough. But there again, like, I don't even know if Bebe's needed at this point. I remember that icon wall. DJ Gon looked fantastic. He looked great on
They
Zen.
never did.
They never needed him.
I don't know why he. Well, I do know why he got played because I think Moon's like, well, I signed an extra flex support, might as well use it. But he's trying to get his money worth.
Sure.
But yeah, like no, they don't need him at all because Lee Jae-gon's been able to play the Zen the whole time.
Mm-hmm. And then you have like Lip looking obviously improved. You have the desynchronicity when it comes to like having Void feeling pressured to like practice both the Doomfist and the Sigma. Now he knows that he pretty much only needs to practice Sigma, and maybe like I don't think Moon's a Zarya guide at this stage, but maybe just to be, open to it. Yeah, I don't think that they're going to be concerned at all. I think that even on like the Midtown look, who was that against? Was that Philly? It might have been Philly. They had a
Who's playing who?
Shanghai played a Midtown this week or last week. Who did they play? Spark Midtown. I think that was like the Void Sigma not double hold, but they played it on both points. And it didn't look bad, but you could tell Lip did not look comfortable on Sojourn at that point. They were still running Molly. So it's like they have improved baseline, and you can still put in Void, who is a fantastic Sigma. I don't think they'll be concerned.
You just said still running Molly. You meant Bebe.
Bebe, well, whatever. Forgettable flex supports at this point.
Crazy take, but I almost want Philly to go. And the reason for that is because I've seen higher highs from Philly so far this year. And so if we're talking about like gambling on teams' peaks, Hangzhou have crazy high peaks. Yeah. And Philly's peaks have also been really fucking high when they've been good.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas I think Chengdu are on the up, but I haven't seen those crazy peaks yet. Now, if they played a really clean game versus Seoul and didn't C9, then I'd be like, oh, bro, take Chengdu. 100% take Chengdu. In fact, we wouldn't even need to have this conversation because Chengdu would have one extra point. They'd be equal points with Philly right now, and it'd be a completely different story.
Yeah.
And I remember saying at the time, I remember casting that Seoul Chengdu game. I'm like, bro, them losing this is going to cost them a lot. You're going to come back to this one moment, like weeks down the line, and be like, fuck, should have beaten Seoul.
Was that 3 C9s in the series? That was like multiple.
I knew it at the time. I knew it exactly at the time. I even fucking said it on broadcast that this result was going to haunt Chengdu.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. One for the history books. One to remember fondly. Funnily, but fondly.
Yeah. What?
It's like Philly losing to Valiant.
Do you think there's a... I don't know how the timeline works out. So there's one travel week, right? Is there not? Is there not like a break before? Yeah, for NA.
NA have a travel week, do they not? I don't know. 19th. First game was on the 19th.
Okay.
Yeah, there is.
So is there theoretically a world where NA starts scrimming with APAC and that moves the meta for everyone?
I don't think so. I think we're getting into like
scrimming. When do they start scrimming is the question, because you're not going to start scrimming until I would say days out from the actual event.
Yeah.
You'd have at most like 3 days worth of scrimming APAC if you get to scrim them in, if you get to scrim them.
Sure.
I think both regions are dying to scrim each other though, because you want to expand your variety of teams that you can play for sure.
Mm-hmm. I think some new ideas get injected, but I think like for esports as a whole, I think you court coaches and analysts and staff members that are very opinionated and very bold in how they approach the game, and they have like very ingrained ideas. So I think you may change some opinions, but I don't think like you're going to drastically shift things. I think they are like cemented.
For example, I don't think London shift really too much at all.
No.
I think they know exactly what they're good at and what they're not good at, and they're going to keep. You just gotta fucking believe, and they're just gonna keep doing it.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see a team like Dallas maybe change up a few things, because that Lucio Moria shit is not fun. I do not like that. Ideally, they look at Shanghai and be like, maybe we should play some of their stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So, cool. Talking about NA already, should we just move on to them? What are some of the matchups? What are some of the matches and some of the storylines from NA that you guys think are important from this past week?
I mean, the biggest one to start the week is the Houston upset over Atlanta. I think that was just absolutely unfounded. I don't think these are one of the stats that I hope the league produces, where it's just like X amount of people predicted Houston to beat Atlanta, because I really think it was like slim to none. Maybe some Houston homers out here.
I was say, you don't understand the Houston fans.
Of course,
they're ride or die. They're gonna.
But I think like there was like a clear delineation, like. This is the team that should be winning. Atlanta is the team that should be winning, and in the way that they lost, it was one for the ages. That was a roll the tape. Let's point some fingers. That's a rewatcher. If you haven't seen it, go ahead and watch map 5. What didn't expect it to be a banger, but it had me standing up, had me screaming, had me flailing my arms like a wacky inflatable flailing arm tube man. That was a tilter. I wanted to smash my keyboard after seeing that one. That was rough. That one.
But that's how Achilles broke his hand.
He came here and punched my keyboard. Yeah. No, that one was.
Some people calling it the worst C9 of all time.
No.
Which I cannot agree with. I can't agree with that.
He takes the cake.
It's barely a C9 because they're all like, I don't know. It's like a C9 that's perfectly understandable. That's like an honest mistake, because like the fight goes for so long, that the overtime wick, if you leave it at all, it just fucking it's just gone. Whereas the Youngjin C9 makes no goddamn sense because he literally walks away. Right? It's so different. It is so astronomically different.
Yeah.
In like, the Youngjin C9 is the most preventable C9 of all time.
Yeah. Yes.
Whereas the Atlanta C9, I feel for them and I can be like, yeah, I actually understand why that happened. It's actually fully understandable.
Yeah. I think also just like the stars had to align the most crooked way for that to happen.
Yeah.
Like, I think like that you can have some arguments whether or not certain members of the team had to have been in the position that they were, maybe, not supporting point contention to the point that you should. I also feel for Nero, just like he started screaming, being stun locked in the Doom animation, and he saw it coming, and it was, and then like Hawk got very unlucky based on his punch.
He literally hit a skill shot and died because he hit the skill shot. If you rewatch that, he punches the Tracer, and the Tracer literally body blocks him over the well, and he dies because he hit a skill shot. If he misses his skill shot, he is then rewarded. It's nuts.
Yeah, and it was very close to him sticking. I
personally think punching over the well is fucking dangerous.
It's
like,
risky.
As much as we can say like, oh, he was punished for hitting the skill shot. I'm like, well, you are punching over the well.
Yes, which
I mean, that's a risk. That's a
little dangerous. Yeah, it's just comical that like the way that everything had to pan out, he literally had to hit that. That was one of the considering factors. Also, like the Nano Lucio to like stall point even longer. Like it was a comedy of both successes and failures all at the same time. You had Venom literally trying his pants off to get this team over the line. He's a 2v1, or he's in like multiple like low personnel scenarios, trades up, gets them back in. I think they're up 3 people at the very end where the Lucio has to come in and touch for Houston, and then Atlanta just kind of like flail about for a little bit. Houston comes back, and like you said, at that point, the window of how close you need to be to that point is very, very short. So one misposition, one positional error, and you are going to look very, very goofy. It's tough. I do feel for him, but that came down to the wire. That was tough.
And
good one to rewatch.
I got some moth flashbacks from the player camps. Like the utter despair.
I wish so bad that game. I think Sojourn is great on land, don't get me wrong, but like I think this week in general for NA, we had so many good moments that I wish we were in a studio environment. Like having Nero and Hawk screaming point, like touch, just in a studio environment would have heightened that so much more. The cams do a very minimal job, but I think these are one of those moments that really, this week entirely for NA, would have really emboldened, galvanized is probably the better word, a lot of Overwatch League fans on why they love this game, why esports is so cool, because of these very human moments where utter despair. You look at the memes that have come out of this game are bonkers, but we also don't get to see much from the Houston side of things. You look at the Florida Boston game, which we'll get to. You get to see that. I wish we got to see more of that. So badly, I wish we were still in a studio environment. Just like Florida popping off and hugging each other and being so glad that they reverse sweeped in a situation where Boston probably should have been ahead. You look at that last environment, not to completely jump ahead, but Valentine surviving and trading up in poor scenarios. He probably shouldn't even been there, but he makes the call. He makes the play. He's a little bit greedy, but it works out in theory, but then it doesn't. It's just the utter despair on Boston, I think, really gut wrenches people. But the jubilation, the glory that Mayhem gets to kind of feel, because I feel like they were still in the playoff race. If not, I could be wrong. But the reverse sweep, them just popping off, someone flipping out and hugging, that's heartwarming at the very least. I think we would do a lot of service to get some cameras in there and show this off to people. I think they'd love it.
So, did the right teams end up winning here? I think we all kind of felt like Atlanta probably should have won the series, but in a way, I'm kind of okay with Houston winning that one too. It's good for the competitiveness. You could always make the argument that like if Atlanta was supposed to win, they could have won early and all this kind of stuff as well.
Sure.
Boston Mayhem, I feel bad for Boston, dude. They look like they should have cleaned that up.
They should have won that. Strong. Yeah,
I'm happy for Mayhem to win, but like I'm buying in on this Boston comeback.
Yes.
And I'm buying in even though they got reverse swept, which is crazy. But I just feel like Boston is so... They're definitely just on a major up and up.
Yep.
That I don't know if it's going to result in anything, because unless their stage 3 matches are, good as far as scheduling goes, we'll see. What do they got? They got Boston, London... Not Boston. They got Atlanta, They are Boston. Atlanta, London, Shock... Dallas.
It's a big patch,
it's pretty hard. It's pretty hard. Toronto and Vancouver. So maybe like 3 kind of winnable games in there. Who knows?
I think for Boston fans and maybe even the team, I hope they don't take this to heart. I think they played absolutely out of their gourd. I think Victoria looked phenomenal. I think Valentine had a very clutch potential moment towards the end. I think that back line is really figuring things out. It was a stylistic game, one that I thought they were very favored to win in, and I don't think you go home with your head hung low. I think this is a sign of things to come, like you're saying, AVRL. This is improvement. This is really kind of coming into your own, finding some consistency. And yes, it sucks to be reverse swept. I hear you there, but this is a team on the
now. Who was? That's right. Minerals leading the team now as far as management goes. I was going to say, who's the new head coach? I'm like, they didn't change coach. Still Laurie. So, okay. And they got a new pickup as well. I don't know if this is the time to bring up Seeker or not.
Yeah.
But
I'd be surprised. I'm also not entirely too sure in terms of like what his resume is, what he brings to the table. And if I'm going to be a hindsight, recency bias Andy here, I think Victoria had a fucking lights out game. And I think Valentine's been like at least like pretty good most of the season. So I'm interested to see how this rotation works out. Boston are looking up. They're stylistic. I think the way that they play push is interesting.
Seems like they don't even really need to make pickups, do they?
No.
To me.
I don't. Yeah, I think I mentioned as much last row. It's confusing that like we want to rework the entire thing, where I think like the approach that maybe you take with this team is slightly different. And I think you provide a ton of results just being a little soft-handed. Whereas I think like a team like the Justice, I think you need to like make some serious changes. I don't think you need to do much in terms of roster quality for Boston. I think they've shown most of the season.
Maybe they look... Actually, I think they're just trying to gear up for a double hit scan. This is the replacement for Striker. They want to make sure they're solid for double hit scan. That actually makes a lot of sense to me if we're looking at through that lens.
I think they've got an interesting read on the game, and I expect that to be really apparent come stage 3. This stage is a little bit of a wash, and that sucks. And like,
yeah, you ready for the Punka Queen?
I mean, we'll see. Could be a punk Rissa. Who knows?
It's the punk hero, guys. Punka Queen. It's coming. So.
Florida looking good though. London continue to showcase both an incredibly potent style, but showing a level of form that a lot of teams are having some difficulties with. So Paris on the mend as well, 3-2 against Toronto. Missed there in terms of predictions. Very close though, very very narrow. And I think again, if you look at Toronto and you look at Paris, that really should not be close. But Paris is making a comeback. They're really getting in there, and I think they're due for an upset. They're due for a win, and I do believe that team is going to start to become competitive. So I'm looking at NA's lower table, and I'm looking and I'm a liking. Vancouver on the mend, Boston on the mend, Justice. No comment. It's, and I mean no comment in the most like literal way, like because it's tough to read, but everybody's making moves, everybody's improving, and that's a good sign for the league. So stage 3 with a sizable break, yeah, we got some things coming.
I don't want to skip ahead too much because we do have a preview episode that we normally do as well. But Justice versus Vancouver. I want to take this chance to like dig in a little bit because I don't think we're going to spend time digging in during the preview episode when we kind of fly through the Preds a little bit.
Yeah.
But like, what do we? Don't give me your Pred, but like, give me your kind of rundown on like what the deal is here. Like, could this be?
It stops and makes you think. That's for damn sure. It stops and makes you go,
Could it be?
Is there a world?
First win? Is it their first one of the season coming up?
It could be. It certainly could be. I wish I was a bolder man. I wish I saw something about Vancouver that I'm like, I'm a bolder man. I'm not a bolder man. I need something from Vancouver, and I don't think the Zarya look that we saw early on in week 1 of the Midseason Madness is it. I'd love to see this team be a little bit more stylistic, and I think DePay has some stuff cooking.
The problem is Vancouver have only won one map this entire stage.
Yeah.
Every game they played has been an 0-3, except for the one game versus Atlanta. It was a 1-3.
Which, I
think I already know every single community fan Pred is going to be in Vancouver over Justice. You know what this reminds me of? This reminds me of all the hate that Atlanta got when they lost to London. I don't know what it is. It's teams losing to London getting a lot of hate. It's almost like it's almost like people can't celebrate London being good without shitting on the team that London beats. It's kind of wild to me. But yeah, there's a lot of hate that, to be fair, again, I think Gator shit talked in that as well. So maybe people just didn't like Atlanta because of that. But I just find it like an interesting coincidence that teams that lose to London are the ones that get all the hate. Anyway, my point is, what was my point again? I just got sidetracked.
We're talking about Justice Vancouver. Could this be the one? Is this the time Vancouver comes in?
And then what happens is everyone like hate Preds Atlanta to lose versus who they play in the kickoff clash immediately. They played some team straight off the rip. It was let me take a look. It was Florida. Everyone hate Pred Atlanta to lose to Florida because they just disliked Atlanta after the whole London thing.
Yeah.
And then Atlanta won anyway. I think there's a very good chance this is one of those situations again where everyone hate Preds Washington to lose and then Washington just wins anyway. Because you have to remember that Vancouver are still in, what's the record again? 0-11. And it was 1-15. They're still a 1-15 team so far this stage. Yep. So I mean,
take that. Yeah. This is not like a hate Pred. Justice are a competitive team. The Vancouver Titans are barely in discussion for being an iota of a competitive team. Are they improving? 100%. You can't take that away from DePay is working with this team, and you can see some very tangible improvements, even though it's hard to see this stage because of their strength of schedule, which is very, very difficult. However, this is a Justice victory.
If you looked at this from the perspective of like, oh, it's a mid-table team playing a bottom-table team, then you would probably play the mid-table team, right?
Yeah.
Like, for example, if this was Toronto, Mayhem, Boston playing against Titans, you'd probably Pred those teams and not the Titans, right? So logically, it makes no sense to Pred against the Justice here, unless you just fucking hate the Justice, which a lot of people do right now. So probably they're just going to hate Pred Justice. So I'll enjoy claiming my 3 points for Predding the Justice this time.
It is a 3-point game. I think those bold enough to like dive into And that's where it's like, okay, yeah, there are some flaws of the Justice macro, right? Like if we're going to just remove emotion from it, yes, the Justice have some holes. Yes, there are some issues with the Justice. They are a little bit inconsistent. They have some questionable decision making when it comes to, certain things for whatever X or Y reason. Is that something the Vancouver Titans can leverage and beat? That remains to be seen. That is hard to see based on this schedule that they have the tools within them to topple the Justice. I think it is going to be competitive. I think it is going to be a little bit closer than I think people expect. But Justice should be getting this across the line. This should be clear.
This one could be like a Map 5 even.
Could be.
Legitimately.
Yeah. Definitely could be. Justice are on some shaky ground.
Part of the issue for me for Vancouver is I find that how many times do they play mirror over false recently? It's like almost all the time, right?
Yeah.
Because false realistically doesn't even really play that many maps compared to mirror. So. And mirror only plays the Doom, correct? Like he comes in, just plays the Doom.
Pretty, yeah. That and like
I think Vancouver. That's it, yeah. Vancouver in a way right now is like a mini Atlanta or a mini Outlaws.
Yep.
But they don't have the flexibility that Hawk has to move between both Sigma and Doom, which is ideal. Yep. That if you could combine False and Mirror into one person, you would get Hawk. But they don't have Hawk. So you've basically got your own Dante. You've got Dante at home on the Vancouver Titans, on that Doomfist. And I think that makes this team very readable and pretty like one-dimensional. I say this about all the Doom teams. I even said this about New York on Player Chat. It's like I think because New York are like now a Doom one-trick team for just basically saying, all right, Kellen, you're just going to play Doom now. I don't know if that's going to be enough, but for some teams, you just got to play to your strengths. I respect the DP for like being like, you know what? We have Mirror. He plays Doom. He plays Doom well. We're just going to rely on this.
Yep.
You want to use Outlaws and Rain as, examples of how we should be playing. They're doing well reasonably. They're within the top 6. Let's just do them, and maybe we get some dubs here. I would say just as a favorite here, like as crazy as it sounds, I also wouldn't be super surprised if Vancouver did win. I don't know what the mental the Justice players are at. I don't know if they're feeling really down from the London loss. Are they checked out? These things always play a factor as well.
Yep.
I feel like the problem is, if you look at the results that Titans have had, they've been slowly inching up and proving a level where Washington Justice is feasibly beatable, right? Yeah. Just look at the results. And it feels like very important for the Justice to win this one as well.
Yes, I mean this would be. I mean, you will not hear the end of it. Partially from me, like this is a winnable game. You should not be losing this. This is not losing. Like this is close. Yeah, it's going to be tough to put the Vancouver Titans away, especially if like Aspire and Shockwave are having a day. Yep. They're not an 0-11 team. Unfortunately, that's their record. But yeah, you can't lose this.
Here's the thing. Here's the overall like sentiment from me over the Justice in their last game and their upcoming game is that losing to London was not out of the question.
No,
I actually feel like London probably should have won. But losing to Vancouver feels a lot more out of the question in terms that like, okay, you are a mid-table team, Justice.
Yep.
You should not be losing to a bottom team.
Yep. Yeah.
Right now. So I feel like losing to London's not a big deal, but losing to Vancouver does feel like a big deal.
Yeah,
even though you could say like factually losing to London's a big deal in terms of qualifying, I get that. But like if we remove that from the equation, just talk about each game in a vacuum, then this one's like a bigger deal because Vancouver are a far weaker team than London, definitely as far as standings goes, but just everything across the board, right? So I mean, yeah, I don't want to downplay Vancouver too much because I agree. DP's done God's work on this team so far, despite them only getting one map, but
it's a tough schedule, and this is like a must win for the mentals for Justice. Like, this is going to be a very difficult break if you give the Vancouver Titans their first win. That is going to sting, and that is going to hurt for the remainder of the season. That cannot happen.
I'll tell you what, they have a full, however many weeks of break while everyone else goes to Hawaii.
Yeah.
Hey, if anyone on the Washington Justice wants to take a mental holiday, a mental vacation, a la OG from last year, go ahead.
Might
Go
as
ahead,
well.
take a mental vacations.
Yeah. I mean, it's probably best in the long run to, as much as I think players and coaches want to just keep grinding, this is the perfect opportunity to get ahead of everybody. There's ways to approach this. There's
I got
ways to
something
approach
cursed to
this.
say. I have an extremely cursed comment to make.
Okay.
Is that Washington Justice should just take a mental vacation in Hawaii, so everyone else is competing and they're just enjoying the beach. And that's cursed because, like, on one hand you're having fun and you're just like having a holiday.
Sure.
On the other hand, you're right there where everyone else is playing, where you think you probably
are,
should
yeah.
be, and you're fucking in full depression mode because
You're
of it.
the ghost of Christmas past looking in through the window,
You're like
seeing
the guy, you're like the person who wasn't invited to the party, and you just kind of come along anyway. It's like, hey,
you're in the neighborhood.
Yep. Oh, I was just in the neighborhood. Can I drop by? Like,
that is some mental warfare from the coaching side, the staff side of things, to like really light a fire. And boy, howdy, would you light it? Yeah, no, I think there's ways to approach these breaks that I think it's not as cut and dry as I think a lot of people make it out to seem. So, Justice have got some pressure on them.
Tell you what, last year, players that missed Hawaii would just be spamming ranked. This year, I don't know what they're spamming.
They can't spam much.
Aim labs apparently. I don't know.
And it's probably for the best. I hate to tell this to you guys. Staff, whatever. Like, you gotta slow down. You gotta take a step back to move forward sometimes. And I think the mentals are an untapped aspect of this game that not a lot of people are paying attention to. So be mindful of this. Be mindful of that.
I believe also that, and I'm not 100% on this. This was an idea float that I asked about, was that the new patch would only be available closer to.
I wouldn't be surprised. I think that's how they did the kickoff flash patch.
No,
what, sorry?
That was directly put into play. Like the thing is, like, like the beta will eventually go down, and that will be before the break begin, or in the middle of the break anyway, right? And then you will still have like a patch development, and so whatever balance changes are coming out and make it into Overwatch League will eventually be put live for stage 3. But I believe the idea is to delay that to a later point than the start of the break. So, technically there are diminishing returns to your ability to practice because you're not practicing on the actual patch. Similar to how we did it last year with hero pools only being announced in the second week of the break after each tournament.
Giving teams an actual, like, you have nothing to do, so you have to take a break. Unfortunately, that's the case, but yeah.
And I'm not sure if that's something that they did. They couldn't do it between Kickoff Clash and...
I'm pretty certain it's to a lower degree, but there was a gap in terms of patch updating that I spoke to Mobugi, former assistant coach of Paris, and he mentioned as much, that there was a gap in terms of the patching. So
yes,
that,
but not as long.
Go.
Yeah,
not as long. It's fractional.
Because they needed them to
Correct.
test the patch for competitive feasibility. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The mid-season break's definitely going to be a lot longer, but
guys, I got it.
Similar rules apply.
Washington can just pick up Mobugi. Oh wait, no, he's going to do military.
He's in the military.
Damn.
Nice guy though. Appreciate speaking to him, and his English is quite good. So.
All right. Any? We're gonna wrap up. Any final things you want to bring up? Anything across the board? Did we miss anything? Any game or team you feel like we should have talked about that we didn't yet?
I will say, New York is a Doom one-trick team, but that backline got a whole lot more interesting for me. Gangnam Jin coming into his own, absolutely nutting on main. The BAP look into Dallas's Lucio Moira is interesting. I thought that was a clever way to catch the proactivity from Dallas. Seemed to work all right. A little weird, but seemed to work. And yeah, I'm interested to see what New York looks like come week 4. Well, obviously we're gonna get into that and come the Preds, but not a team, I think I'm hearing some breaths of life. I think I'm seeing some sparks fly. So hopefully we get some good games out of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, I sense a bit of, you know what, I respect New York for finding answers or attempting to find answers, but right now there's definitely a sense of desperation here where it's like, you know what, we're gonna force the echo. Kellen's only gonna play Doom, and we're just gonna fucking hope for the best. They just make it work. Just fucking make it work. Slam that square peg in. It's not that square because Doom is fairly meta
Pretty
still,
good.
but
Don't know what happens next patch though. Boy, do I don't know what New York looks like next patch. There's a few teams that we don't know what they look like. Houston being one of them as well. Like, I don't know what y'all do.
all right.
Can't be good though.
So we'll see. What's New York's next game? Who do they play?
New York plays the Houston Outlaws to open the day.
Boston.
Yes.
And Boston. Okay.
So not completely unheard of.
Games,
Could be something there.
I'm gonna get a literal Doom matchup here. Dante versus Kellen. That'll be fun. Alrighty. We're going to head out now as we get ready for the Pred show. So thank you for tuning in to 245. See you very shortly for 246.